I don't remember when my identity as a female developed. I always thought I was born with it and that I had a natural tendency to embrace and develop it. My family, consisting of my parents, my younger sister, and me, lived in a small apartment, so the family, of course, was close, and I could observe my parents' relationship and learn to copy my mother's behavior. On lazy weekend mornings, my parents used to stay in their bed late, where my sister and I joined them. I remember one time I said, "When I grow up, I'll marry Daddy." "But I'm already married, sweetheart," my dad said, and broke my heart. My dad was the ideal man at the time for me, and I wanted that kind of relationship with someone no less than ideal. But in my child's mind, he rejected me. I think from that moment onward, unknowingly, I started to see my mom as my competitor who stood in the way. I have another memory from my middle school years. We used to call it a secondary school in Latvia. I remember looking into the reflection of my figure in the lacquered door of the wardrobe. By the way, a wardrobe is a piece of furniture for clothes. So, as I was looking at the reflection of my figure, which was rather a dark silhouette against the bright window in the background, for the first time, I noticed that I had an hourglass figure, and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I loved seeing myself turning into a woman. Sigmund Freud is wrong. I never had penis envy. I remember I first saw one in kindergarten and how shocked I was. I felt so sorry for the boy having his internal organs dangling outside his body. I shared it with my mom, thinking it was some kind of disease, and she wouldn't believe what I saw. That's when she explained to me that all boys are like that. I didn't want to be a boy because of that. An internet overview of a search of how gender is determined gave me this result. While sex chromosomes initially determine biological sex, hormones play a crucial role in the development of sex characteristics and influence gender identity. During prenatal development, hormones secreted by the testes or ovaries drive the development of reproductive organs and subtly shape the brain. These chromosomes continue to influence physical and psychological characteristics throughout life, including puberty. Today I'll start a conversation about identity, hormones, and relationships. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, you're in the right place. This is the podcast Eel Zebra's Transformations. I used to be an eel zebra. I was prey, but I committed to transforming into a lioness who lives without feeling guilty about how nature created her. Transformation involves detaching from decades of conditioning, and it requires doing things differently. So, I am podcasting to keep track of my progress. If my sharing helps someone else, I see that as a win for everyone. But now, without further ado, let's get started. Growing up, I never questioned my gender identity. I knew I was a girl, and I wanted to grow up to be like my mother. I imagined one day I'd have a partner like my father. In that sense, I was lucky, or so it seemed. I didn't have to wrestle with the world about who I was. My hormones, my body, my culture's expectations, they all aligned. But looking back now, I see something I had been blind to for years. My deep attachment to femininity and traditional roles became an invisible cage, one I locked myself into under the weight of cultural expectations. I gave men the steering wheel far too often. I downplayed my strength because I knew my femininity could open doors, and I feared being seen as a woman with balls, which in my interpretation would be unattractive to men. So I chose submission, convincing myself it was grace, when really it was a lack of awareness of my power. It was my insecurity. That behavior ran so deep, it etched itself into my identity. Even now, in the second half of my life, shaking it off isn't easy. But I am doing the work. I'm rewiring from the inside out. At the same time, I've become acutely aware of how powerfully hormones shaped my experience. Not just my identity, but my moods, my desires, my relationships. During my fertile years, I felt everything intensely. The cycles were like tides, rising and crashing, taking parts of me with them. When I started feeling premenopausal symptoms, I chose to go for hormone replacement therapy because I didn't want to lose my libido. The HRT helped to stabilize me. Now I feel freer, more even, less hijacked, but also aware of how delicate the balance is. Even with low-dose HRT that I'm on, I have had symptoms that reminded me just how easily things can go off track if HRT is not dosed correctly for my body. I sometimes think about what it means for a child to feel discomfort with their gender. I honor that experience, but I also feel deeply concerned about the growing tendency to intervene hormonally or surgically at any age, but especially before puberty has run its course. What if, in trying to ease immediate distress, we create lifelong complications, physically, emotionally, hormonally? The body speaks in layers and over time, and I believe it deserves a chance to express its full story before we permanently alter it. As I said, I've taken hormones to gently support my system while approaching menopause. Just that small adjustment caused symptoms I didn't expect, so I can only imagine what it must be like to go through powerful medical interventions over a lifetime, to block puberty, to reshape a body, to rely on external hormones indefinitely. I'm not saying this from a place of judgment, but from observation of my own health journey. I worry about the long-term consequences for those human beings whose anatomy gets irreversibly altered, and how they'll think of those choices when they are my age or even much earlier. I'm also speaking from the perspective of what I've learned about how my diet likely contributed to my own health challenges and how I'm now healing. I urge parents and anyone navigating these decisions not to give into what's being sold to you. Ideas, surgeries, hormones, all too often marketed for profit. Instead, have faith in your body. It's always guiding you toward how to love it better, not how to abuse it. But to anchor my narrative somewhere solid in this episode, I'll begin unraveling the hormone thread. I'll start by talking about the thyroid, a small gland, so easy to overlook, yet so critical to our health, our energy, even our emotions. When the thyroid falters, nothing works quite right, and yet so few people truly understand how central it is to the body's entire hormonal symphony. Before I do it, though, I'll give you a summary of what I've talked about so far to enable you to see the bigger picture I'm painting throughout my podcast. In my previous episodes, I explored the surprising ways that diet can affect our long-term physical and mental health. I talked about how fructose and carbs can contribute to insulin resistance, oxidative stress, and even cognitive decline. These substances are found in everyday staples like bread, rice, and even seemingly healthy foods like fruit, smoothies. Many people consume them without being aware of how harmful they can be. We also looked into oxalates, plant defense compounds that many people unknowingly consume in high amounts through foods like spinach, almonds, beets, and sweet potatoes. These compounds can cause real harm, contributing to inflammation, immune dysfunction, and even mental health challenges. I shared how I experienced brain fog, shoulder pain, and eventually tested positive for autoimmune markers, and how I suspect that dietary choices played a significant role in that decline. What I want to emphasize now is this: our diet, what we put into our bodies, and what our ancestors ate, affects us in profound and lasting ways. It shapes how we feel, think, and age. It may even influence how children experience and interpret their own identity. What if by changing their diet and removing anxiety-inducing sugar, their confusion about gender identity eased? Would that possibility be worth exploring before embracing a cultural trend that encourages children to declare a gender different from the one evident at birth? The influence of food on us, humans, goes far beyond anxiety or confusion. Its effects can show up as food intolerances, allergies, or deep imbalances in the hormonal system. What we eat determines how well our bodies can regulate energy, emotion, and even the way we see ourselves. Still, focusing only on carbs and oxalates gives us an incomplete picture. In my view, there are 3 fundamental dietary pillars we need to understand to truly grasp how we function as physical beings. We've talked about the first 2. So what's the third? The goitrogens. Goitrogens are substances that can interfere with thyroid hormone production by disrupting iodine uptake or other steps in hormone synthesis. They're naturally occurring compounds found in some foods, particularly cruciferous vegetables, and can also be found in some medications and environmental pollutants. To start discussing hormones, let's begin with the thyroid. It's a small, butterfly-shaped gland at the base of the neck, but don't let its size fool you. This gland is the conductor of your body's hormonal orchestra. Its primary function is to produce and release thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, which regulate metabolism, energy production, body temperature, and a lot more. What many people don't know is that thyroid begins developing early, very early. The thyroid is one of the first endocrine organs to form in the embryo. It arises from the base of the tongue and migrates down to its final position in the neck. Its early development underscores just how foundational it is to everything that comes after. If the thyroid gland fails and produces too little hormone, the condition is medically named hypothyroidism. If the thyroid produces too much hormone, it is a condition that is medically known as hyperthyroidism. Both conditions can be expressed as a wide range of effects on your body and overall health. Effects of an underactive thyroid or hypothyroidism can include slower metabolism, when a person can feel fatigue and unintentional weight gain. Hypothyroidism can also lead to a slower heart rate and contribute to high cholesterol, increasing the risk of heart disease and heart failure. Moreover, it can also cause mental health issues such as depression, difficulty concentrating, and memory problems. You can also experience it as dry skin, dry or coarse hair, or even hair loss. Other common symptoms include constipation, increased sensitivity to cold, muscle aches, and heavier or irregular menstrual periods in females. The effects on an overactive thyroid or hyperthyroidism include faster metabolism, In such a case, an overactive thyroid increases your metabolism, which can lead to unintentional weight loss despite increased appetite. Hyperthyroidism can also manifest as a rapid or irregular heartbeat known as tachycardia or arrhythmia, and potentially lead to atrial fibrillation or congestive heart failure. It is common for people with hyperthyroidism to experience anxiety, nervousness, irritability, and difficulty sleeping. This, of course, can affect your relationships, and no therapy or training would work effectively if you don't address the physical side of the problem, the root cause of which could be your diet and old beliefs about what is healthy. Other common symptoms of hyperthyroidism include hand tremors, increased sweating and sensitivity to heat, more frequent bowel movements, and an enlarged thyroid gland, which is called a goiter. Hence the word goitrogens that I used before and in my previous episode when I talked about broccoli and said I wouldn't eat it. Broccoli is a goitrogen. Last year I went to Latvia, where I had an ultrasound of my thyroid. It was detected that I had 2 nodules on my thyroid. Knowing that, and knowing that I do tend to have anxiety and sleep issues, and I also had irregular periods all my fertile life, unless they were regulated, I'm quite confident I've had hyperthyroidism for a very long time. Yet I'm glad that I have learned all this information, because knowledge is power. If I know what to fix, I can start fixing. When we understand the thyroid as a foundational player in the system, we begin to see how fragile our hormonal balance is and how resilient we can become if we nurture it. There are 2 experts whom I want to briefly reference in this episode where I talk about the thyroid's health. The professional viewpoints of these 2 humans closely align. These experts are Dr. Elizabeth Bright and Dr. David Brownstein. I mentioned Dr. Bright before. She's a highly respected American osteopath and naturopath living in Italy. Dr. David Brownstein is a conventionally trained board-certified family physician with the additional overlay of holistic principles. What unites both experts is a simple but radical realization. The thyroid affects every cell in the body. If it's not functioning well, no system can thrive. Both experts' opinions are in alignment as to how the thyroid is like a metabolic compass, sensitive to nutrient status, stress, environmental exposures, and even emotional trauma. They are also passionate about the central role of iodine and deeply concerned about how misunderstood and underused it has become. Dr. Bright stresses that iodine is required to build thyroid hormones, and without it the thyroid cannot do its job. She notes that iodine deficiency often stems from a combination of low intake and high exposure to halides like fluoride, bromide, and chlorine that block iodine receptors. It's because the other halides, such as fluoride, bromide, and chlorine, are iodine's lookalikes, and they take the place of iodine in the thyroid, so there is no place for iodine in it if one of those elements is already there. Dr. Brownstein agrees about halides. He even views iodine deficiency as a national crisis driven by processed foods, poor soil quality, and public health policies that have demonized iodine without understanding its systemic value. He is especially vocal about bromine, which he calls one of the most dangerous but under-recognized environmental toxins. He also flags chlorine and fluoride in tap water as major contributors to hormonal dysfunction. Both doctors advocate detoxification through nutritional support, emphasizing the importance of unrefined salt, proper hydration, and cofactors like selenium and magnesium. They agree, without removing what's blocking iodine, healing is incomplete. In addition, Dr. Bright is a strong advocate for a high-fat carnivore diet, especially for women dealing with hormonal and thyroid issues. She warns against anti-nutrient-rich so-called health foods like almond milk, raw spinach, and kale, citing their goitrogenic and mineral-depleting effects. To Dr. Bright, animal fats, organ meats, and nutrient density are the cornerstones of recovery. Dr. Brownstein, while less strict in dietary identity, also emphasizes unprocessed whole foods rich in iodine, selenium, and cholesterol. He encourages unrefined sea salt, sufficient protein and natural fats, and warns against brominated bread and ultra-processed foods. Both doctors touch on how misinformation and cultural conditioning contribute to thyroid dysfunction. They both see cultural myths and systemic neglect as major barriers to healing. As we move into or go through the second half of life, many of us begin to feel the effects of everything that came before. Our past choices, inherited beliefs, the food we ate, the habits we formed, and the stressors we carried. But aging doesn't have to mean decline. Midlife can be a time of empowerment, clarity, and deep transformation if we take the time to understand our bodies and how they work. We live in a world that offers quick fixes, trendy diets, and surface-level solutions, but real healing asks us to slow down, go deeper, and reconnect with the wisdom of our own biology. What I've discovered is that many symptoms we've come to normalize, like brain fog, low libido, erectile dysfunction, fatigue, depression, are just signals. They're messages, and when we tune in, they can guide us not only toward better health, but toward a truer version of ourselves. I believe we, the older generations, have a responsibility not just to heal ourselves, but to educate and uplift the next ones. Young people may not yet see the long arc of life, but we can. And when we share what we've learned, not with fear or judgment, but with love and clarity, we help them navigate their own journeys with more confidence. And it's the confidence that really matters. Looking back on my life, even up to very recent events, I can say with confidence that I haven't had enough of it. But it's always a process. My full-blown confidence is still cooking. In the coming episodes, I'll continue unraveling the hormone thread and talk more about recommended supplements, including iodine. The latter is somewhat a controversial topic because not all experts agree. A little spoiler alert. I've found a well-substantiated opinion about iodine that contradicts those of Dr. Bright and Dr. Brownstein. I want to share it with you so you can make choices based on how you feel and what feels right for you. But I'll stop here now and thank you for walking this journey with me. I'll be back to you with episode 19 after a week. You've been listening to the podcast of LZB. If you like what you hear, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed, followed, liked, commented, and shared. If you want to learn more about me, my causes, my products, and my services, please visit my website, ilzeb.com. That's ILZEB.com. Disclaimers. In this podcast, I talk about mental and physical health and what has helped me to heal. Nothing that I say should be regarded as medical advice. If you have any medical condition, consult your doctor. Also, I'm an artist and storyteller. I'm sharing my stories because that's what artistic people do. Take it as fiction and as a form of my art. Even though I may sound as if I'm recalling events from my past, I don't confirm they actually happened. And if they did, I'm not blaming or accusing anyone, nor should you. I take all my life lessons with gratitude, trusting that they are given to me
to expand my soul.